Had too much going on. See, you let folk get too much technology, they don't know how to handle it. But all right, so we'll still jump back on. I'm sure he probably just had a an internet issue. All right, so hey, good morning, brothers. Glad to see everybody on. Welcome to Broga. So had a passage that I wanted to share with you all today. It'll sound a little bit familiar. This is from the second book of Samuel, chapter 6, verses 14 through 22. David danced before the Lord with all his might. David was girded with a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. So like I said, that'll probably sound familiar to you guys because we've used that in the past to anchor our reflection when we've talked about prioritizing joy. All right, Brother Willis, you back?
Yeah, what point did I drop, man? How long was I gone? I didn't even know.
As soon as you made that big head comment, I'm looking on the screen to see who got the biggest head that was like, oh, all right, I got something for you. Because you froze up as soon as you made the big head comment. But if you don't mind, we just jumped right into the reflection. So again, this is a passage about David. He's actually coming back from a battle. The Ark of the Covenant is this very, important religious relic for the Israelite people, and he had to go and fight the Philistines to get it back. They had won it in a previous battle. And so, we've used this before. Like I said, it might sound familiar, but I felt like, in the times and conditions in which we live, a reflection on joy might be worth working back into the rotation. In fact, I'm not sure we could ever have too much reflection on the importance of joy in our lives. And I like David. I really like this example of David because for me, David's somebody I can relate to. He's real. He's a complicated figure, doesn't always make the right decisions. He's someone, again, that I can relate to. And he's also busy. He is, he's super busy. He's the king of Israel at this time. He's also one of the greatest warriors throughout history. And yet and still, he finds a way to be a role model for us in terms of prioritizing how important it is to celebrate joy. In fact, again, when we see him in this passage, he's busy because he's just finished a battle. He's bringing the Ark of the Covenant back from a battle. So again, even in the busyness of where he is at that moment, he finds time to prioritize and emphasize the importance of joy. And I think there's some things that we can learn from David's joyous dance that would serve us well even today. And there are a couple things when we did this before that I either missed or I hadn't really finished wrestling with this text enough to get everything I needed out of it. So the first one is something that I actually did notice, but I didn't know what to make of it. I just, sometimes you read something, you're like, that's odd. It sticks out, but I didn't know what to exactly do with it. So the text says that David was girded with a linen ephod. An ephod, that was a robe that the priests would wear when they were performing their sacred rites and their rituals. Some scholars think that meant that David had danced out of his clothes, but I think there's something deeper there. David's dancing on his way back from battle, and he's wearing the sacred uniform of a priest, right? So what's odd about that, David, like we said, David's the king, and he's a warrior, but he is not a priest. So that is what stuck out to me. But like I said, I didn't know what to do with it. But as I reread this passage recently, it hit me, right? Here's the deal. In extreme times, we all have to become priests to some extent. Times when we see somebody in desperate need of connection with the divinity that abides within themselves, and they just can't get there. They need to be connected to their heart. They need to be connected to their spirit, to their soul, wherever the divinity lives within them. But for whatever reason, they just can't get there. And it's like we talked about last week. They're in the car driving 200 miles per hour, so they don't have to look around, and more importantly, they don't have time to look within. And again, like we talked about also last week, we can be their spotter on top of the grandstands to help them get a better and broader, and in this instance, deeper perspective. And when you do that, you stand in the gap for them. You intercede for them, and you might never call it this, but what you're doing is priestly work. So that's what I've been wrestling with in this text that I didn't get last time. David is wearing the linen ephod of a priest because he's doing priestly work, dancing before the Lord, giving himself over to unbridled passion and joy and praising God for the victory. He's standing in intercession for his people. He's standing in the gap for the people who might not be able to dance right then, but they need to dance. But again, for some reason, sometimes we just can't get there. And so he's standing in the gap for those people. And I want you all to know this whole reflection really has its roots in the discussion we had on the chat group this week about art and how important it is to embrace art and how artists sometimes speak to us and carry a message for us that we might not have been able to articulate ourselves. And I think the job of the artist is really to put into their art that those words, those feelings that the non-artist might not be able to express. And so I want to take a quick second to just recognize and shout out, appreciate the artists who are on the call. I see Brother Richard, I see Lance, I see Leland, Cease not on, writers, folks who use their words, use their art to connect to that part of ourselves that is eternal. Artists, poets, musicians, dancers, especially for Black men, connect us to a beauty within ourselves that we are often told that we don't have the right to. And I think that's the core part of the message that the ancient writers planted in the story for us to get out of it thousands of years later. King David, one of the bravest, toughest, most fearless men in history, chose to dance his way home. Now, as I was wrestling through this text in my head, my reticular activation system, and you all have heard me talk about that enough, it became engaged. So David dancing in the priestly robe. All right, that was taking shape, right? Then you have the role of the artist as intercessor to the divinity within us, and that was taking shape. But there was something else forming, and I had to really work with it, right? And then my reticular activation system caught something in its net. And if you all remember, that's how our reticular activation system means. Reticular means net-like. It captures something in its net that would have otherwise just filtered right through the net. So I saw on Facebook a video clip of about 10 sisters are performing in somebody's, multi-purpose room somewhere. And as they're dancing around the room, one of the sisters dances toward the camera like this. And you can see the beautiful smile on her face. It's the kind of smile that invites you in, that makes you want to smile like that. And I realized right there in that moment, of all the times that I've seen African dance, one thing that I recall is that the dancers are usually smiling. Now, that's work, I'm sure. You can tell these sisters working, right? This is hard work. But they always look like they're having the time of their lives and they're incredibly excited to be dancing. Now, back to the text, the last thing that I just completely missed when we talked about this text before is that David was bringing the Ark of the Covenant back from the Philistines who had taken it in an earlier battle. Now, I'll speak for myself. Before I went to seminary, I thought Ark was a synonym for boat. I thought it was just another name for a boat, right? Because you get that from Noah's Ark, right? But an Ark is actually a container that holds precious items, keepsakes, if you will. So God didn't tell Noah to build a boat per se. God told Noah to build a treasure chest to hold what was precious to God. And of course, because of the flood coming, that treasure chest just happened to need to be a boat. But in our context today, David's dancing in praise of the Lord, wearing the priestly robe while bringing back the Ark of the Covenant. He's bringing back the treasure chest that contains the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. And this is what I missed before. King David is doing priestly work, interceding on behalf of his people as he's bringing back to Israel the treasure chest that contain the tablets of the law that God gave to Moses. Why is this ark so important, and what does it have to do with our reflection of joy today? So y'all have heard me say before that the greatest cause of suffering is human forgetfulness, right? Well, David is a political and military leader for his people, and he puts on the mantle of religious leader as well to go get this ark back from the Philistines. The ark must be in Israel. Why? Well, without the ark as a physical reminder, the Israelites might forget who they are and whose they are. And if they forget the law and that God spoke to Moses directly in the desert and gave him the 10 Commandments, then Israel may think of themselves as no different than any other nation of people. with nothing to make them special. And how do we act when we forget that we are called to be special and to do special things? If you forget you're special, then you start to think you're just common. And when you think you're common, you feel common. And when you feel common, you act common and you get common results. But I can tell you this, if you're on this Zoom this morning, you are not common. Common folks wouldn't have gotten out of bed, gotten themselves together to be here. But we are all certainly susceptible to forget. That's why we each need our own treasure chest with the things in there that will remind us who we are and the level of greatness to which we are all called. So today I ask you a question. What's in your heart? What's in your treasure chest to remind you how important you are to the world, how the generations of your ancestors worked and prayed and danced and pleaded and interceded for you to even be here today? How your unborn grandchildren are looking back throughout history, praying for you to not make those common decisions that will eventually cost not only you in this generation, but also them in future generations, but that you would rather make those uncommon decisions that will benefit them for generations to come. And what I want to leave you all with today is a reminder that you always have the right, the responsibility, and the power to make the uncommon decision to choose joy. All right? Now, as is our custom, we end our weekly reflection. As we end our weekly reflection, I ask that you all would join me in this intention for our time together. Let us be intentional that our Broga practice might be a living metaphor for our life practice. And so it is.
So it is our intention.
Our intention. Let us be intentional, as busy as we are, as imperfectly human as we are, and all the things that we say we're about, that we may not be living up to. Let us be intentional, even in the midst of all those things, about prioritizing joy. And so it is.
It is our intention.
Our intention.
Let us be intentional to surround ourselves with art, music, poetry, entertainment, and experiences that renew a sense of joy in our lives. And so it is.
So it is our intention.
Our intention.
Finally, brothers, let us be intentional about embracing the dance and the drum that are not just part of our bloodlines, but that might just be the keys to unlocking our superpowers, not only for ourselves, but for our ancestors and our future generations. And so it is.
So it is.
So it is
Our intention.
We pray these things in the names of both our ancestors and our unborn grandchildren. Amen, Ashe, Namaste, and so it is.
So it is.
So it is. So quickly, I'd like to just jump into a moment of standing meditation. Maybe we can digest a little bit of what John's word means to us individually. And I think it would be nice to